They killed the Iran's supreme leader. They killed his daughter. They killed 40 of his senior commanders in a single strike. And they believed that was enough, that the regime would fracture, that the streets would rise, that Iran would pick up the phone. Instead, within 24 hours of Mojtaba Khamenei taking power as Iran's new supreme leader, ballistic missiles were already in the air heading toward Israel. Not a statement, not a warning. Missiles. This is what regime change looks like when it fails, and it has failed completely. Understand what the operation was designed to produce. Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28th with a specific theory of victory. Remove the leadership. Create a power vacuum. Watch the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fracture without ideological direction from the top. Watch the Iranian population, which had been protesting in the streets, fill that vacuum with something different, something the United States could work with. Trump said it directly in the first hours of the operation. Take over your government. It is yours now. That was not battlefield communication. That was a political program. And that political program has now produced its result. The result is Mojtaba Khamenei, 46 years old, son of Ali Khamenei, appointed supreme leader within hours of his father's death. Not a moderate, not a pragmatist, not someone interested in picking up the phone. A hardliner who grew up inside the IRGC's ideological apparatus and whose first act in supreme power was to authorize a ballistic missile strike on Israel. 24 hours. That is the timeline between succession and escalation. Every military and political history of externally imposed regime change contains the same chapter. Decapitation does not produce collapse. Decapitation produces radicalization. When you remove a leader by force, you do not create a vacuum that moderates fill. You create a crisis that the most committed, most radical, most organizationally prepared faction uses to seize total control. In Iran, that faction is the IRGC. The IRGC did not need the supreme leader's death to consolidate power. It had been consolidating power for 40 years. The supreme leader's death removed the one institutional check on IRGC authority that existed inside the Iranian system. And the IRGC's response to that removal was not confusion or hesitation. It was missiles. Because missiles are the message. Here is what Mojtaba Khamenei's first strike communicated to every audience watching simultaneously. To Israel, the leadership change does not change the targeting list. To Washington, regime change produced a harder regime, not a softer one. To the Iranian military, the new supreme leader is not a transitional figure managing a negotiated exit. He is a war leader. To the Iranian population, the period of uncertainty is over. The IRGC is in control. The revolution continues. To China and Russia, the ally you invested in is still standing and still fighting. Every one of those messages was delivered in the same 24-hour window. That is not improvisation. That is a prepared playbook executed the moment succession was confirmed. Now look at the missile profile itself. The strike was not symbolic. Symbolic strikes use older systems, lower accuracy, targets chosen for psychological impact rather than military effect. This strike used current-generation ballistic missiles against specific Israeli military and infrastructure targets. The message embedded in the technical choice is precise. The new supreme leader has full operational access to Iran's missile arsenal. The IRGC chain of command transferred without interruption. The targeting intelligence collected before the strike was not lost in the leadership transition. Iran's military machine did not miss a beat, and that is the intelligence failure that nobody in Washington is currently willing to describe publicly. The assumption underlying decapitation strategy is that leadership removal disrupts the organizational capacity to execute complex operations. You remove the head, and the body cannot coordinate. Iran's body coordinated within 24 hours of head removal. That means the operational capacity does not sit in the Supreme Leader's office. It sits in the IRGC's distributed command structure, which survived the strike intact, transferred authority immediately, and resumed operations without a detectable pause. America's theory of the operation was wrong, not tactically wrong, strategically wrong. The strikes destroyed targets. The targets were real. But the theory that destroying those targets plus removing the Supreme Leader would produce regime change or negotiated surrender was wrong. And the evidence for that wrongness arrived in the form of ballistic missiles 24 hours after succession. Here's the harder question that the missiles force into the open. What is the objective now? Before the operation, the objective was defined as preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons, eliminating IRGC proxy networks, and forcing a negotiated settlement on American terms. After 24 hours of Mojtaba Khamenei, the new Supreme Leader has fired missiles at Israel. The IRGC proxy network is still operational across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and the only negotiating signal from Tehran is the ballistic missile trajectory itself. The Geneva demands that American negotiators presented before the operation were described by an Iranian official as structurally designed to be rejected. Those demands required Iran to surrender its entire missile program. dissolve its proxy network, and accept permanent nuclear limitations. Iran's response to those demands was to elect a new supreme leader, whose first act was a missile strike. That is not a negotiating posture. That is a war posture. And a war posture that has now been demonstrated to survive decapitation, leadership transition, and 24 hours of the most intense American-Israeli air campaign in a generation. Look at what Iran has absorbed and kept fighting. The supreme leader killed, his daughter killed, 40 senior commanders killed in coordinated strikes, nuclear facilities struck, missile production facilities struck, oil infrastructure struck, air defense networks degraded, and the response to all of that is a new supreme leader, a functioning missile arsenal, and a strike on Israel within 1 day of succession. The regime has not collapsed, the regime has not fractured, the regime has hardened. Military history has a specific term for what happens to a population and an institution under existential external attack: rally effect. When survival is threatened from outside, internal divisions compress. The reformists who wanted to negotiate, the moderates who wanted to open to the West, the young Iranians who were protesting in the streets, all of them face the same external threat now. And the external threat is not abstract. It is American bombers and Israeli F-35s and 40 dead commanders, and a supreme leader killed in his compound on a Saturday morning. The rally effect does not mean everyone supports the regime. It means the regime's opponents lose the political space to act against it while the country is under attack. Mojtaba Khamenei did not need to build a new political coalition. He needed the missiles to fly, and they flew. Now watch what comes next. Because the 24-hour missile strike is not the end of the succession story. It is the opening statement. Mojtaba Khamenei needs to establish legitimacy inside the IRGC command structure, inside the clerical establishment, inside the Iranian political system. The way a new supreme leader in a revolutionary state under attack establishes legitimacy is not through diplomacy. It is through demonstrating that the revolution continues, that the enemy has not broken Iranian will, and that the military machine he now commands is fully operational. The missile strike in the first 24 hours establishes all three simultaneously. It also eliminates any possibility of a rapid negotiated exit. A supreme leader who fires missiles at Israel 12 hours into his tenure cannot sign a deal with Israel or its American patron 4 days later without destroying the political legitimacy he just built. He has closed the negotiating door from his side just as completely as Trump's Geneva demands closed it from the American side. Both leaders have now made escalation easier than de-escalation. And between them, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, the oil is still not moving, the storage tanks in Kuwait and Iraq are still filling, and the global economy is still absorbing the cost. The operation was designed to end the problem. It produced a harder version of the problem with a new face in charge. That is what regime change looks like when the theory is wrong. That is what a 24-hour missile strike from a brand new supreme leader means in the language of strategic outcomes. And that is why the next 72 hours are more dangerous than the 72 hours before the operation began, because now both sides have absorbed the opening moves. Both sides have updated their assessment of the other's determination, and both sides have concluded that the other will not stop. When two sides reach that conclusion simultaneously, the variable that determines what happens next is not strategy. It is endurance. Whose economy breaks first, whose domestic politics fractures first, whose military runs out of precision weapons first. Those races are now running simultaneously. Drop your analysis in the comments. 24 hours, new supreme leader, missiles already launched. Does this end in negotiation, or does it run until one side cannot continue? Because right now, both sides are betting it is the other one that breaks first.